Hello and welcome to ICANN Media. I'm your host, Rob Hislop. We are coming to you from the Petroleum Safety Conference being held in Banff. And one of the speakers that was here at the conference, speaking at a event put on by Catchcan, is Michael Phibbs. Michael, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure.
You're with Chemscape. Tell us a little bit about your company.
So Chemscape, we help our clients manage first safety data sheets, but more chemical hazards, and we have some tools where we help them suggest safer products and how to identify what control mechanisms they should have in place.
Well, so what sort of things? So when you walk into a company and you take a look at the environment there, what is it that you're looking for right off the bat?
So usually it's their chemical inventory, because from their chemical inventory we can identify all the things that will cause cancer, we can identify things that will cause reproductive hazards, we can identify things that can burn the skin, and we can suggest things that are actually far less hazardous than that for them to use for whatever task that they're doing.
Okay. You mentioned, one of the things that you mentioned in your discussion was the hierarchy of controls when it comes to substances. And you say that for the most part the way it's done is upside down, and you would like to see it take a bit of a different progression.
Absolutely. Quite often the engineering controls, they've included elimination and substitution, but actually it's really, those terms are really only on paper. They're actually not being implemented. So I've suggested to our clients that if they have things and if they have pack rats in their organization that store these things, they're actually storing hazards. And if those hazards are never going to be used, they're pointless and they should be eliminated. If they have solvents, there are safer solvents than some that are widely used that are actually very toxic, readily penetrated through the skin, and there are certainly ways that they can improve this and improve the health of their workers.
But you say one of the things that companies tend to do is go straight for the personal protective gear as opposed to looking at some of these other things that might have a greater impact.
Absolutely. And personal protective equipment, it's going to be absolutely necessary in some cases, but a lot of cases they can actually get rid of the hazard or substitute the hazard so it's far less, so they actually don't need personal protective equipment.
And some of the things you said about the personal protective equipment, which you can see there's a lot on display here at this conference in Banff right now, is that it's misused.
Well, it certainly is. There isn't one glove that's good for every chemical. There isn't one respirator that's good for every chemical. And actually, most gloves are only good for a day. Most respirator cartridges are only good for a day. And that's just not how it's going to be used in the industry. And quite often, employers don't realize the full cost of going to a personal protective equipment.
But they must understand, because I imagine the people here that are selling their gear will talk to the purchaser and let them know about the dangers and how they're supposed to be used. Why is it that a company then would choose to ignore this? Is it purely cost savings, initial cost savings that they're looking at?
I think they view it as a short-term cost savings, and it's, as opposed to sometimes it's not within their culture to actually try to reduce the hazard first, rather than they'll say this is what we have, and what do we have to do to fix it? Then they turn to personal protective equipment.
So what are some of the best practices that you would like to see implemented then?
Certainly some of the best practices are that there's ways that they can substitute, and actually with the advent of or implementation of what's known as WMIS 2015, there's some new hazard symbols, and actually the new hazard symbols are much better than the older hazard symbols to enable substitution and safe substitution.
You do mention one of the things that you talked about is the hazard, what is it here? Hazard assessment. You say it's important that it includes health. Explain that to us.
Absolutely, it's important that it includes health, and under the WMIS legislation that's been in place for close to 30 years, it's always been part of that, but industries ignore that. It was never part of any of their audits. That's very capable. People are very capable. All they have to do is they have to read the label and read the safety data sheet, or what was called material safety data sheet, or MSDS before.
One of the speakers here at this event said that if politicians would get more involved and see this as something that they could make a difference in, because when you consider the impact that injuries have on a society, preventable injuries as well, that he thinks it's going to be up to the politicians to take a leading role in this. What do you think about that?
I don't think this is going to change until the politicians actually do look at this. I think that there's a lot of laws or regulations that have been in place that if would have been enforced differently, either by the regulators or by the audit processes, that a lot of these things would have been happening already. These changes would have been in place.
Michael, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We've been chatting with Michael Phibbs here on ICANN Media.